Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar on Dapian, our compliance simplified product. Next 30 minutes or so, you'll be hearing from myself, Dr. Leanne Hawkins, Chief Operating Officer of Coalescent Limited. I am here in the comment section, so any questions you have whilst over the next 30 minutes or so, just drop them into there and I'll be responding to them for you there. So please do interact and ask any questions that you have at the time. So a bit of background for you then. This was a product actually that was born out of a collaboration in the public sector. It commenced sort of October 2020 time and involved all those organisations that you see there. So a real mix of local authorities and universities and health and the ICO as well. All coming together not only to pool their funds, but also to bring their IG expertise to the table to design our Dapian product. We kicked off with our discovery phase, about sort of 3 months worth of work, where we were looking at, well, what's the challenges that we're trying to address here. Originally started with data protection impact assessments. We have since moved on into other areas of IG, such as information sharing agreements, and now on to information asset registers and record of processing activity, as well as data ethics. So the challenge that we're trying to address here is that IG teams are largely at capacity. They are the ones that, for whatever reason, the bulk of the heavy lifting of a DPIA and indeed ISA is falling to in terms of completion. And actually they want to empower the wider business to take responsibility for their own DPIAs and ISAs, empower those non-experts to complete quality assessments. The implications here then is that any backlogs of DPIAs that they have are reduced and the quality of assessments that are being produced are increased. Those are the challenges we're working with, and the product then was implemented in around sort of 6 months' time. Been rolled out across the public sector now for the last year or so. I'm going to jump into a demo of that product now, but just to kind of set a bit of scene setting in terms of the different types of users that we have in the product. So we have staff members, so very much a product that has been designed by those IG expertise, but actually entirely focused at the needs of non-experts. So very hand-holding staff members and the wider organisation through the process of DPIAs and ISAs, letting them understand if they need to do a DPIA or ISA, and then onto the correct types of templates and the best ones for them to use and complete. Moving on from that then through the kind of sign-off stages and any DPO input, so a set of permissions that's designed for your signatories and your advisories in terms of making those sign-off decisions or playing that IG expertise. Then a set of permissions designed for third parties, so either you're inviting contribution from your suppliers or other people that are outside of your organisational boundaries, or because it's an information sharing agreement that requires those third parties to sign up to that. So we have a really strict set of permissions that's designed to allow those that are beyond your organisational boundaries to play their role. So a demo then. One thing I'll say about the demo that I'm going to run through, we will be going through this at some pace. We only have sort of 30 minutes, but for anyone that wants to scrutinise the questions we're asking, the templates we have and the workflow that's there, please do just get in touch or ask me in chat or drop us an email or come via our website, and I will be happy to set you up with some access to this version of the product that you're seeing me use here, and you can kind of explore that in your own time. So here we have our dashboard. Once you've kind of logged into the product using single sign-on or our own identity platform, you have your dashboard which shows you everything that's going on inside your world of DPIAs. This dashboard is different for different types of users. So staff members will want to see something slightly different to the IG team, who may want a more broader, a more comprehensive view over the organisation. If we capture the data, you can report on it. So there's a full kind of reporting dashboard that comes with this as well. This particular version is focused around the data protection impact assessments and information sharing agreements as well. And I'll sort of show you how that works. So if I'm a non-expert user approaching this subject for the first time, what I might want to do is have a look in our external search section which highlights a number of DPIAs that have been shared from other organisations using this product, where they've said, oh, I've done this DPIA and it's a great best practice example of how to do that. And they voluntarily share some of their DPIAs within this external search, just to help those non-experts get a sense of what to put in their own assessments. If I know what I've taken a look at that external search, I know that I'm going to go on and do this process, and so I would start my DPIA over here. I'm going to fast forward a couple of steps, just to process. So here I have a scenario where I've been through some screening questions. So let's have a look at those. So here we have 13 yes or no questions. I suppose this is the first point in the process where one, staff members and non-experts are understanding if they need to do a DPIA, and two, what the best template is for their needs. This is probably the first part in the process also where the ICO got quite heavily involved in helping us shape what these questions should say, and then the collaborating organisations helping us to write the supporting content, essentially us putting the expertise on the shoulders of non-experts in this process. So I'll answer these randomly and you can see how that works. I say please don't feel the need to read these questions during this demo. Just drop me a line. I'm very happy just to give you access to the product and you can have a look. So you'll see there it's kind of suggesting that I do need to do a DPIA. So if I jump back over to the one I did earlier. So we have our screening questions, and that has suggested in the case that I ran through earlier was an information sharing agreement is required, and also a full DPIA is required here. So that's put those into my tasks for me. If I look at the full DPIA, I'll open that up. So this is the standard, our standardized best practice version of our DPIA. And as you would expect, ask the question, read the explanatory guidance that goes with that, handholds those non-experts through the process of completing these templates. These templates are also driven through the shortest possible route. So what I mean by that is if I say no to this question, nothing about my experience changes. I don't need to ask any further questions about that one. It's only when I say yes that these additional questions then unveil themselves. So we kind of start to get rid of some of that fear and complexity that is perceived in this process by just making it look like it's as short as it possibly can be. So I'm going to spin through some of these questions relatively quickly and get to a point in the process where we're looking at identification of risks. So section 10. We've implemented a feature here, again, to support those non-experts in identification of risks, where it says, okay, we've looked at how you completed this form and we have some suggested risks for you. So I've outlined some of them below. You see I've started to already add some of these to my list of risks. So based on how the form's completed, the form's looking at the logic and learning from that and saying, okay, here's some glaringly obvious risks that we can spot in this process. These are then for the user to say, yeah, do you know what, I agree with that, and I agree with data lost in transport. And you'll see it's adding that to my section of risks. This also acts as quite a useful checkpoint for the ID team or the DPO to have a quick look at, well, these are the obvious ones, so at least these ones should probably be covered in some way. They're not mandatory, you don't have to add them, they are just our suggestions, but they are ones that have come from our wide customer base and their input over the last year or so. You'll see then it gives me, first of all, a blank template for risks to input. And the reason why we've done that is because we don't want you just to rely on our suggested ones. They're a great starting point, but you should be encouraging users to enter their own manual ones as well, and they can do that in these templates that are provided below. Add or remove any of a number of risks as you like, so by removing or adding sections down here until you get to a point where you have a completed list of your risks. These templates are designed to be collaborative, so if you're not sure on how to answer some of these questions, or if it's someone else's job to provide that section of information, you can do that by kind of saving your progress, returning to it later, and then reassigning this to that user and being collaborative in the way that these assessments are constructed. So if I move that, if I sign in, if I'm to say someone John Smith or whoever it might be, I'll select this user because I have access to this account. And then say whatever you want to say to them. So you help me with section 3.3 and then submit. So you'll see here now that my conversation with this person is now going to start to build over here on the right hand side, and any previous conversation I've had with them as well is there. So now if I jump over to an email inbox that this person owns, so we're not waiting for that person to hang around inside the product and see if stuff's assigned to them, we're actively notifying them that something is being expected of them. So you'll see this notification comes in here. What this then says is, Leanne is asking you to help her with section 3.3, and if you follow the link that's given in the email, that will take you and give you access to that DPIA to provide that support. However, if that user doesn't want to engage with the platform for whatever reason, or they just know the answer to the question that you're asking them, they can just reply to this email, and that response will be put back into the platform. So none of this conversation is lost. So I don't know, the information is here, and you can attach any attachments along with that as well. So replying in the same way you reply to any other email in the world. That will notify them that will notify Leanne by email to say that this person has replied to them, but it will also drop it into the product as well. So if we have a look here, and just that should have landed. It will take a few minutes, but that will land over here on the right hand side. So there we go. The responses come back in from the information asset owner or John Smith or whoever it was you sent it to, and that's the email essentially that they replied with the attachment that came with it. So as you can see, all of that is still there from an auditing perspective. Same applies then to our information sharing agreement. If we assume that we've been through our full DPIA, we've collaborated on it, we're happy now that it's at a point that it's going to move on to the sort of sign off. The same applies when it comes to an information sharing agreement. They are collaborative, so you can assign them to other organisations that you want to sign up to this agreement, or other colleagues that you want to collaborate on these documents with. They look very similar. It's just on this information sharing agreement subject rather than a DPIA. Also worth noting, if you ever want to attach any files to any of the documents in Dapian, then you can do that by choosing files from your device or dropping them into the system here. I'll save that and come back to that later. Also here we have, from an auditing perspective, all of the history is tracked. So every single keystroke that happens in the product, you'll see the versions of that, who made those changes, and indeed what time they were made. So if you ever need to prove or evidence any changes that were made. We have the concept of watches as well. So watches is designed for individuals that maybe aren't getting directly involved in the production of any of these agreements or assessments, but they want to know how they're progressing. They want to be made aware of them, and they want updates on how they're progressing. So maybe sort of department managers that you're not asking to get involved, but they would like to know that they're happening and how well they're progressing at that time. So you can add or remove people to that watches list to make sure that they have status updates. Okay, so once we've been through the production of our DPIA and our information sharing agreement, or indeed any of the other templates we have in here, such as CCTV, DPIAs, or international data transfer, or indeed all of the law enforcement equivalent forms as well for those organisations that they are relevant to. We're then looking to move this on to some sort of sign-off process, which you do using the submit features within here. So these submit buttons here. If I try and submit this particular document, it will fail for a number of reasons. These fields have strict field validation, such as required fields and other formats that you have to conform to. and so it won't submit successfully. It will point out the errors to you that need your attention. You don't have to go hunting for them. You just click on each one and it will take you to the place in the process that it is failing. So this particular one, we know I haven't completed, and so on and so forth, until you get to a point where the form is entirely complete, and then you can hit the submit button. Of course, that's intentional in that you don't want to submit for sign off an incomplete form. The intention is, though, that you can save, so you don't have to do this all in one go. Save and return to it as many times as you like, and you can get that collaboration with others until it is at that complete quality stage. I'll save my changes so I can return back to that later. Some other features that are in here as well is that, great, you've been through and you've completed all those documents. They're fantastic at that time that they were signed off by the organisation. But now you have the expectation that you come back and review them at whatever point is appropriate in the future. So whether that's because it's pilot phase and moving into business as usual, that would be an appropriate time to come back and review these documents, or just because a certain time frame has elapsed or something has changed that would mean that you need to review them. So you have these dates that you can set to prompt a series of email reminders to go out to anyone that was involved in the production of it, or signing it off to let them know that that review date is coming and that they are expected to come back and provide that review. One feature, I suppose, to support with that review process is that it may be that you don't want to alter this original DPIA. You want to have that as a record in time, that that's how this DPIA looked at that point. But when you come back to review it, if lots of the information remains the same, you've got some updates to make, but the majority remains the same, you can clone your documents so that then you're carrying over all of the information you completed previously, make your amends, and then send it back through your sign-off processes there. It will automatically link and relate those DPIAs together so that you know that one originated from the other. And you can also use that link-related DPIA feature for all sorts of other reasons. So maybe you've got a kind of parent-child relationship going on, a program of work with lots of individual projects that hang off of it, trying to track a DPIA through the pilot phase into business as usual. All of those are use cases where linking your DPIAs together would make entire sense. Finally, then we have the ability to make this visible outside of your organisation. So whether that's because you want to share it with another customer of ours, you're willing to publish a best practice example, whatever that might be, then you can flick that switch from no, you're not wanting to share, which is the default position, and then you can change that if you are willing to share to change that on an individual DPIA basis. So this DPIA now is visible outside of my organisation. What we find in practice happens quite a lot is they don't want to, as organisations, you don't want to share your original DPIA, but you are willing to share a redacted version of it. And that's again where a clone is useful, because you can take a clone, redact anything from it, produce a summary, and then publicly publish it. Again, useful for if you're wanting to share DPIAs or summary of your DPIAs with the public or with on a more kind of public basis. So if I just jump back to the rest of my slides, just sort of talk to you about where we're going in the next few months. So we have our kind of full roadmap outlined. The features we've been through just in this demo are not necessarily exclusive lists. Please do just shout if anyone wants a more comprehensive demo of the product, or indeed wants free demo access to the product itself to have a play or show it to other colleagues. But it's very much a collaborative tool that's designed for non-experts to take more responsibility for DPIAs and ISAs across the organisation. There's always a role to play for the DPO, for the information governance teams and for signatories, but the idea is that they're there to play that supporting overarching role rather than the heavy lifting of the DPIA always having to fall to those individuals. So where are we going with this then? So as I said, we've done DPIAs, we've done information sharing agreements, we've also done data ethics, That was particularly led by our universities. They seem to kind of have been doing that for longer than others. So that piece is now in. We're now moving on to information asset registers and record of processing activity. Some kind of into a sort of single combined module, particularly, is where we're going with that. One where you can manually update it, keep on top of it, but also that is proactively being fed by the DPIAs and that are being created by the wider business to kind of help and support keeping those information asset registers and record of processing activity up to date. We're then moving on to other assessments, so things like the equality impact assessment and potentially IT supplier assessments that you might ask of your suppliers, and any other type of data capture that or forms that might be relevant as part of that processing. We're then looking at how we might bolster our automated risk offering, adding more and more risks as we get more data in. It means we're able to learn more from the responses that are expected of these DPIAs, and we can add more in as we get more and more DPIAs through the system. So across our customer base, the average savings that are achieved are 64%, and I will outline where they come from shortly, but that is average across our customer base currently. The whole intention of the product, and they have seen this happen across large areas of our customer base where they had those backlogs in DPIAs and ISAs. Those backlogs are diminishing fast, as is the quality of the DPIAs going in the opposite direction. The quality of those assessments and those agreements are increasing quite drastically as we're supporting and hand-holding more users through this process. Covering then where these savings have come from. So this is, say, on average across the customer base, the salary of an individual that sits in the IG team or where the heavy lifting of the DPIA is falling to before the implementation of Dapian, that was around about the 45k mark. On average, the number of hours that they can work in a year is 11680. That takes into account holidays and what have you. And the number of DPIAs that they were getting through on average was around about 23. That meant that the cost of operating a single DPIA was just shy of £2,000 before Dapian was implemented. Then the implementation of Dapian came along. Now we then reran this exercise. We kept the salary of that individual the same, mainly because we wanted worst case scenario. In reality, what has actually happened is those DPIAs are being completed as intended by more generalist staff, and therefore the salary of that individual is somewhat lower. But worst case scenario, we kept all the parameters the same. The only difference was that the number of DPIAs that were being completed on average per person went up to nearly 65, and therefore the cost per DPIA reduced from £2,000 down to £700 per DPIA. And that's where that efficiency saving is. First set of figures minus second set of figures gives that 64% or just shy of 64% in savings, and that's £1,200 per DPIA that's being saved on average. Pricing for this then, we are very transparent about not only where we're going with the product, our roadmap, and even our API documentation is publicly published. So for anyone that wants to do any integration with the product, maybe you've got a different information sharing agreement product that you're using, or you're using a different information asset register or ROPA. We have publicly published all of our APIs. So if you ever want to take a feed from Dapian and use it elsewhere, then we will be very happy to support you in that. We also publicly publish our pricing. So if you visit our website, under there you will see public sector and private sector pricing available, and you can purchase via our website, or indeed we are also on G-Cloud for those organisations that is useful for. What does an implementation look like? It's offered as software as a service, Dapian, so there are no IT requirements except for having access to a modern browser and an internet connection. Everything else is hosted and managed by ourselves here. Hosted on AWS in the UK, for anyone, that's a difficult question we get asked. It takes around 3 days for us to hand you your completed instance of the product, and your subscriptions to us, your licenses with us, include unlimited number of users and unlimited number of DPIAs. It does come with a full service level agreement, as you would expect, and training is also provided. We do have an option for single sign-on, and there's a small additional cost to get that set up for you. And that for any organisation that can support single sign-on, we'll be very happy to achieve that and have done across our customer base. So I guess that's all that from myself at this point. There's some contact details there for me. Anyone that has any questions, I say I am sat at the moment in the chat box, so please do drop your questions in there and I will answer those for you, as well as my email address. Please contact us directly if that's of use. For anyone, just before I go, that's using our demo product, if you get access to that from myself, then we do have at all times web chat on the product. So if you're using it, have any questions, want to ask anything of us, please do jump over to our web chat and there'll be someone that answers within a few moments for you there within business hours. But that's all from me. As I say, thank you very much for joining and I hope to speak to you soon.